Imagine running Microsoft's cloud entirely on your own terms. This week in IT, Azure Local and Microsoft 365 Local go live, letting governments and regulated industries run mission-critical workloads and AI models completely offline. Meanwhile, Excel Agent Mode expands to Europe and even works with files stored on your local PC. And Windows 11's latest preview pumps up system reliability and a built-in network speed test, integrated Sysmon, and more. So stay tuned for all the latest news. Welcome to This Week in IT, the show where I talk about everything connected to Azure, Microsoft 365, and Windows. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Chaosoft. This week, Microsoft announced that Azure Local and Microsoft 365 Local are now generally available. Now, I believe they announced these products back, I think, at Ignite, but do correct me if I'm wrong, Ignite last year. And essentially what Azure Local does is allow you to bring compute, storage, network, all those things that you might go to Azure in the cloud for, to your local data center and have them work completely disconnected from the internet. Now, Microsoft 365 Local builds on top of Azure Local and allows you to bring those productivity solutions that we're all used to using. So specifically Exchange, SharePoint, Skype for Business, brings those things again to your local data center and will allow you to have those productivity solutions and run them without any connection to the internet. Now, these solutions are part of Microsoft's sovereign private cloud offering, and really they're intended to be used by European governments and, as I said in the intro, regulated industries that really cannot move data into the cloud for whatever reason. These solutions, in my mind, are specifically targeting Europe, although they are available worldwide. So at the moment, that means Azure Local and Microsoft 365 Local. They're also going to be bringing Foundry Local, so that's Azure Foundry, but a local version of that's not available yet, as I understand, and it's only going to be available for qualifying partners or customers, if you like. But in principle, Azure Local, Microsoft 365 Local is available to anybody who wants to use it. And these things, are probably maybe a little bit too late in my mind for Europe, because if you imagine, there's been a lot of uncertainty, especially with this latest version, Trump 2.0, I like to call it. There's been a lot of uncertainty in terms of working with America. There's a whole discussion now happening in Europe about that. Now, this private cloud, this sovereign private cloud, can be used totally disconnected from the internet, or it can be also used in a hybrid scenario. And if you use it in a hybrid scenario, then Microsoft is still promising that, any data residency rules that you set up. So for instance, if you're in Germany and you want to keep your data local with Azure Local, and you also want to keep some data in the cloud, but within the jurisdiction of Germany, then that will also be honored if you do decide to go hybrid with it. But as I said, it can be completely offline if you want. Now, is this all a little bit too late? As I said, European governments are already talking about their own digital sovereignty plans. France announced, I think it was earlier this year, that they are planning to introduce their own system, which is a little unfortunately named Visio. Obviously that's the name of a Microsoft product, so it's a bit unfortunate, France, I think. And Visio is intended to essentially replace Teams and Zoom. Now, what do they mean when they say it replaced Teams? It's not just the chat functionality, of course. You've got the video conferencing, you've got all the services that sit underneath Teams. Obviously, it's based on SharePoint. There are things happening with Exchange in there. There are all the other apps. So this is something France is developing purely for government. This is not going to be available to private companies, but it's their first step, if you like, into reducing reliance on things like Zoom, Teams, which is obviously Microsoft, the American partner, and to make sure that they can control their own software solutions and data. Now, I question why, I understand why initially this only may be available to governments, but maybe it's something that could eventually be open sourced, that could also be made available to private companies to help business reduce its reliance on America. That isn't happening at the moment. I also wonder what's going to happen with smaller countries in Europe that can't necessarily afford to build their own systems like France is doing. Maybe, they'll be able to share this system with smaller countries, or maybe they'll be able to help fund the smaller countries to build their own systems. Not sure where all that's going to go, but obviously Microsoft is now putting forward their solution and saying, well, maybe you don't want to really go down this route yourself, and you could still use our solutions. Now, even Microsoft themselves are saying using a fully local solution still comes with its own risks. They believe that having the control plane in the cloud, making use of all the security features that they have that are essentially cloud-based, really helps to improve security and keep these things safe. They're saying if you go down the local only route option, if you like, then that brings in a whole load of risks in terms of securing that data and those systems. And of course, they are right about that to a certain extent. And that's something that governments and big organizations are going to have to consider with this. When Azure Foundry Local does become available, it's going to allow organizations and governments, of course, to run their own large language models in their own data centers, and Microsoft is partnering with NVIDIA to provide the GPUs to make that happen. So that's another interesting development. I'm not sure what the timeline is for that, but I guess that will become available later this year or maybe early next. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Should European and other countries around the world still trust Microsoft with these offline systems, or do you think they should go down the route that France is going to develop their own digital sovereignty plan and their own software and solutions like Visio? I'd love to know what you think. Before I go on to the next story, I've got a quick favor to ask you. About 52% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. Now, as we go live today, we're on about 14,140 subscribers. I'd love it if we could push that up to 14,200. So if you'd like to see these weekly news updates from petri.com, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure that you don't miss out on the latest uploads. Now, when Microsoft first started showing us what Copilot could potentially do already several years ago, a lot of the demos focused around Excel, and some of the most impressive features were what you could do in Excel. Now, in my experience, at least over the last couple of years, using Copilot in Excel has been fairly disastrous, been pretty useless in every respect. But over the last year, it's gradually started to improve quite a lot, and I'm using Copilot with Excel more and more and seeing that it's becoming more useful. Now, this week, Microsoft announced that Copilot Agent Mode is coming to European customers. So this is something that's already been available in the States. I'm based in Europe, but I don't see Agent Mode yet in Excel. And this is going to enable you to do a whole load more with Excel. So there have been demonstrations, things like that you can ask Excel to go out and look for information on the internet, compile it, make some analysis from it, create some graphs, some charts, and it can go away and do all of that stuff for you in the background. So that's a really interesting development. Microsoft also announced this week that you'll be able to use Copilot in Excel with files that are stored on your local PC as well. So that's another interesting development, because up until this point, it's been cloud only. So with Agent Mode, you can automate workbook creation, you can do scenario modeling, data analysis, formula generation and visualization, and you can even fix broken formulas, and you can choose between GPT and Claude models to actually process that work. Microsoft has said they're also bringing editing features into Copilot for Excel as an app skill, as far as I understood. And they're saying that these features for Copilot Excel are going to be rolled out between February and March. So maybe that's the reason I'm not seeing that show up yet, but hopefully it should be in a copy of Excel for you sometime soon. There's an optional performance update update out for Windows 11 right now that you can download if you choose to. It's going to become mandatory next month, so I guess it'll get rolled out as usual with the cumulative updates as part of Patch Tuesday. So one of the biggest updates that this performance patch includes is improved reliability waking from sleep, especially when the device was under a heavy load when it went to sleep. So that's one of the biggest things that's coming with this update, but there's a whole load of other small improvements. So Sysmon, if you know that tool from the sysinternals downloads, that's now being integrated into Windows 11. So that's great for doing advanced troubleshooting. There's going to be a built-in network speed test on the taskbar. I haven't seen that myself, but that could come in quite handy. Emojis are being updated to emoji 16.0 if you care about that. There are some new camera controls for pan and tilt coming into settings. They're improving the responsiveness of Windows Update in settings. That's always been a bit slow and sluggish, so I hope that when I open that next time, it will respond quickly. If you're using Windows on ARM, then you'll now be able to download and use the remote server administration tools. They're going to be compatible now with the ARM architecture. Of course, the RSAT tools are kind of legacy. They're not really being developed anymore. Microsoft would prefer that you use PowerShell or the Windows Admin Center to do your administration, but nevertheless there seems to have been a demand for this, I guess. So there's been maybe blocking people who have to use those tools but are still using those tools moving to the ARM architecture. So that's really interesting. So there's quite a lot of small bits and pieces that will be coming to a Windows 11 PC near you in March. Obviously, if you're a system administrator, now is the chance you have to test those features while it's all still in preview, so do go and check that out. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, because it helps to get the video seen by more people on YouTube. I'm going to leave you with another video on the screen now about how Copilot was caught reading emails that were flagged as sensitive, so do check that out if you're using Copilot in your organization. I'd like to thank the sponsors of this video again once more, Caresoft, but that's it for me for this week. I won't be around next week because I'm on vacation, so I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.